The first time and only time that Clemson hosted Notre Dame, it was Joe Montana throwing passes for the Irish, Dwight Clark at quarterback for the Clemson Tigers. So they obviously hooked up and made some history in the NFL a little bit later. We've got what could be a historic matchup with Clemson hosting Notre Dame in 2015. Number 6, Notre Dame. Number 12, Clemson. Big for the ACC championship. No, but a national championship contention status for the winner, most likely. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us break down the Irish and the Tigers. Look forward to this one, Mike. It should be a rabid Clemson stadium for this one.
Yeah, it always is, especially for the night games. Anytime you get a game at night in Death Valley, Clemson comes out motivated, seems to play pretty well. It's a loud environment. The weather is questionable at best at this point, so it's not going to be easy for Notre Dame if they want to come in and pull off an upset right now. I believe Clemson's a minor favorite currently as it stands, but definitely not going to be an easy environment to play in for any road team, but especially Notre Dame going in there on Saturday night.
Deshaun Watson, a remarkable freshman season, 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been fairly unspectacular against lesser opponents. The one fairly big game was the test at Louisville, and the Tigers didn't do too much on offense, winning 20-17. Deshaun Watson against this Notre Dame defense. What do you see there?
Well, I think what we're seeing from Clemson here early on this year is they're still trying to adjust from Chad Morris leaving Clemson and going the former offensive coordinator, and he went off to SMU and is the head coach there now. And I think Clemson's still trying to get their feet under him. But like you said, Watson has still completed about 75% of his passes. I mean, he's throwing the ball okay, but some questionable decision making, especially a couple of weeks ago against Louisville, had a couple bad interceptions. But I think what we're seeing from the Clemson offense right now is them still trying to find their footing, and it's kind of the opposite of what we thought heading into the season with all the absences on defense from the amount of guys that they lost. We kind of expected them to struggle a bit more on that side of the ball, but it's actually kind of been their strength here early on. The offense has been a little bit suspect. So I think what we're seeing from Clemson once again is just, they're going out. They've had a bye week now to kind of regroup and get themselves ready for a huge game against Notre Dame. But, they've been running the ball pretty well. Wayne Gallman has carried the ball for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns so far this season. And, losing Mike Williams on the outside at receiver obviously didn't help the cause there for them early. But Artavis Scott has played well, 20 catches already through 3 games for him. So he's the de facto go-to guy, 188 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. His longest catch this year is a 41-yard touchdown pass. So they still have those big playmakers on the outside. Ray McLeod is also stuck out there for the Tigers with his 13 catches through 3 games. So Clemson still has a lot of playmakers on the offense, even though they're still struggling to find their footing a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's going to be most of the ball game right there is going to be Deshaun Watson and see if he reverts to his 2014 form against a formidable defense, a defense that he has yet to see coming up this season. Deshaun Kaiser getting the job done for Notre Dame in place of Malik Zaire and also Torian Falston. Obviously, he gets hurt, and CJ Prosise, what a start to the season. He's had over 8 yards per carry, and he's had some of the more prolific games in the nation rushing the football. So set us up with the Irish on offense.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because all the injuries they had on that side of the ball, and all of a sudden they're still, progressing towards being one of the best offenses in the country, through their first 4 games. And with Notre Dame, they've faced some interesting opponents. Texas probably wasn't as good as they thought they would be when they scheduled them a couple of years back and stuck them on the 2015 slate. But, they blow Texas out. They obviously beat down UMass last week, scoring 62 points on the Minutemen. And, a huge one against Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago for the Irish. So, I mean, the schedule has not been extremely tough in the early going. Notre Dame struggled more than expected, obviously going to Charlottesville, playing against Virginia. But, I mean, for the Irish offense to be clicking as well as it has with the injuries they've had, especially at quarterback, losing Malik Zaire, and at running back, losing Torian Folston, for Deshaun Kaiser to step in at quarterback and throw for 541 yards through, 2 games and change and have 5 touchdown passes. He also has 2 interceptions. But only one of those interceptions has been like a really, really bad decision. He's really done a good job at taking care of the football for them. And CJ Procise, I mean, what more can you say about the kid? He steps in, he's been playing receiver his entire career, and he's a senior this year, steps into running back, hasn't played running back in his life. He's carried the football quite a bit at the receiver position on jet sweeps and plays of that sort. But, for him to be the primary back, with nowhere else to turn, he's been fantastic. 600 yards through 4 games. He set a Notre Dame record for longest run in stadium history a couple weeks back, recording that 91-yard touchdown run. He's got 6 touchdowns on the season. So what you're seeing out of the Irish is the ability to still make plays on the offensive side of the ball. And on the outside, they still have big play threat and Will Fuller, who has yet to be figured out and who really is yet to be talked about outside of, the telecast that Notre Dame is on. I mean, nobody in the country, no national pundit really talks about how good Will Fuller is. Has 454 yards receiving this year and 6 touchdown catches. He's averaging almost 21 yards a catch, and he's, for some reason, it seems like he's overlooked every week, and nobody has really, schemed for him and kind of figured out how to play him on the outside. So I think the Irish still have some playmakers, even though they've struggled with some injuries.
You bring up Fuller, and for those of us watching the game, fortunately, maybe the 2 most talented players on the field for these 2 teams are Will Fuller, playing wide receiver for Notre Dame, going up against cornerback Mackenzie Alexander for Clemson. These 2 guys I would expect to see playing Sunday and playing prominently on Sunday in just a few years. Mackenzie Alexander has some ridiculous defensive numbers going for him. So get this, Mike, in 16 games played at the Clemson quarterback spot as a starter, opposing quarterbacks have only targeted him 65 times, so about 4 times per game. He's given up 21 completions in 65 attempts. And nobody's throwing the ball, and the yardage gained against Mackenzie Alexander on the corner is very minimal. So that's going to be an intriguing matchup of 2 very, very talented players. For those of you who don't, I messed up here on the Dwight Clark, not Will Clark of baseball. Dwight Clark playing wide receiver for San Francisco. Of course, he played wide receiver as well in college. So that was just a little typo on me, and I'm old enough to have seen Dwight Clark play a lot of football. So believe me, I know he played wide receiver at both Clemson and the game winner against the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. So any other thoughts about Notre Dame going to Clemson, and do you have a pick for us, Mike?
Yeah, so with this Notre Dame-Clemson matchup, I think it's, a story about Notre Dame's offense going against this Clemson defense. I think anytime you have a road team going into a hostile environment with a young quarterback in his first true road start, there are some questions about how he'll be able to perform with a game of this magnitude on a national stage. Clemson's defense this year is 9th in the country in total defense, which I think is a far cry from what we expected, given the amount of talent that they lost heading into this season, with all the players graduating and heading to the NFL, most prominently, of course, Vic Beasley, who made a name for himself there on the defensive side of the ball for Clemson last year. But I think it's going to be a game where Deshaun Watson will have to play well for the Tigers on offense for them to have any sort of chance to win. Clemson cannot come out, be as stagnant and as slow matriculating the ball down the field as they were 2 weeks ago against Louisville. That was just a very, very tough game for Watson. I didn't expect him to play that poorly on the road. I knew it would be a tough game because Louisville was winless at the time, and they were coming out motivated and ready to play. But Clemson tried to throw that game away multiple times, and they absolutely cannot do that against this Notre Dame team. As we've seen with the Irish, with the amount of talent that they've lost, they still have a lot of guys who are capable, who have come off the bench and filled in and played really well, and they really haven't missed a beat. Also, the Notre Dame defense, they played very well against Georgia Tech 2 weeks ago, played well again last week against a lesser team in UMass, but are the Irish going to be able to stop the rushing attack with Wayne Gallman and Deshaun Watson's ability to make plays on his feet? I think that's another big thing to watch in this game. I like Notre Dame. I picked against them 2 weeks ago. I picked Georgia Tech to beat them in South Bend. I learned my lesson. I've now been on the record on multiple outlets saying I'm going with Notre Dame in this one, even though I have no idea. It's essentially a pick 'em. I'm going to go with the Irish. I'm going to say that Deshaun Kaiser steps up, plays well yet again, really thrusts himself on the national stage as a very good pocket passing quarterback, which, he's shown the ability to do over the last couple of weeks against defenses that have just been so-so. I think if he plays very well against the Clemson defense, he'll come out and make a statement. And I think finally Will Fuller will get the recognition on the national stage that he deserves, especially if he makes another big play or two in the passing game. So I'm going to go with the Irish very narrowly on the road. Maybe the weather will be a little bit better, more beneficial for the passing game, because if neither team can pass and it gets into a defensive battle, I think Clemson's got the better defense. So we'll just have to see what happens. But I like the Irish in a close game.
Aside from a pretty rough go against Florida State at home a couple of years ago when the Seminoles won the national championship, Clemson has done rather well against name brand opponents since Dabo Swinney arrived. Last 3 bowl games against LSU, Ohio State, and Oklahoma, they matched up well against a number of teams outside of the conference in big games. So I'm expecting Notre Dame and Clemson to go down to the wire. Deshaun Watson, I expect to be a difference maker in this game. Irish could certainly win it. 6th ranked in the country. We are legitimately looking at 2 of the top 10 teams in the country. And, of course, the winner takes a huge step toward a college football playoff berth. So Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC breaking down the Tigers and the Irish. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mark.